Welcome to America's Heroes Group, this time with our roundtable and our partner, the Hines VA Women's Healthcare. Today is Saturday, June 17th, 2023. Tomorrow, June 18th, is Father's Day. Fathers out there, happy Father's Day to you. June is LGBTQ Pride and PTSD Awareness Month. Our host is Kelley. You heard him at the top of the hour. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Production. Of course, Shakai is filling in today as our studio engineer. And our panelists, Dr. Lisette Rodriguez-Cabezas, can be with us today, but we do have Dr. Kate Colangelo. She is a licensed clinical psychologist, currently women's mental health coordinator at the Hines VA. How are you doing today?
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me.
So you have been a licensed clinical psychologist working here in Illinois at the Hines VA since 2014. You currently serve as a women's mental health coordinator at Hines, but you focus on the development of gender-specific reproductive-focused treatment options for women veterans. What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we know that there's certainly a really important link between our reproductive health and our mental health. Particularly as women during those stages across our life cycle, there's a lot of connection between hormonal imbalances and changes that happen. And so this is an area within our VA healthcare system that often does not get a lot of attention because our women make up a smaller percentage of our healthcare patients. However, it's an important link because we recognize that women can often go through things that are specifically due and related to our health as identified women in the reproductive system that we have. So because we know that there's a significant connection and a link between our health and our mental health, this was an area that was really important to myself and the team that we have, which is wonderful here at Hines, to make sure that we have a really specialized and focused treatment for women veterans that is unique and above and beyond other reasons why veterans may seek mental health services in the VA.
So what ways can you describe to us how the mental and the reproductive health are linked? What are some of the ways it manifests itself?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about kind of maybe some of the conditions that we specialize in treating, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about where that link can happen. So we know first and foremost, it might be really common for people to think that reproductive health is just related to this perinatal period, which is during pregnancy and postpartum. I just was working with a colleague the other day who was actually talking about a women's wellness workshop that she created. And some of the middle-aged veterans that she was working with said they weren't really interested in the session on reproductive health because they said something along the lines of, oh, I'm past the point of being pregnant. It's not relevant for me. However, it's really important to think that reproductive health across the full lifespan, which is a pretty extensive time period. So for women, it's between the interval between menarche, which is the average onset of menstruation, which typically happens for girls around age 12, but can happen anywhere between ages 10 to 14, all the way up through menopause, which on average happens around age 51, but can also start anywhere in the 40s or 50s for women. I think it's also important as we're kind of talking about this just to be really mindful of inclusivity in the terms and the words that we are using. So we may refer often to women veterans as we're discussing our services today. However, we know gender is often not binary. It's not just male or female. And the expression of someone's gender identity is much more inclusive, including transgender, gender neutral, non-binary, pangender, agender, genderqueer, two-spirit, third gender, and other identities. So it's really important to be clear that we are referring to persons who have female reproductive health systems, which is not only limited to those that identify as female specifically.
So has that led to any challenges when you're in the medical field? Because a lot of people have been debating about this because of the fact that when people outside the LGBTQ community who are just traditionally thinking about male versus female as simply a binary definition as your organ, not necessarily an identity per se.
Sure.
Does that cause any challenges when you're trying to treat people?
No. So what's important to us is that we identify persons that have those reproductive health systems that are likely to be impacted by the cycles that they might be going through. So things like menopause. So someone who is going through kind of the last of their menarche and is having kind of a stoppage of those systems, we know that the hormones in place at those times are likely to have a big impact. So regardless of necessarily gender identity at those times, it can often be most important to recognize the physiological structures within one's body body that might be giving difficulties related to that. So, for example, if someone might identify as a trans male, however, they still have female health reproductive systems, we want to make sure that because of those hormonal imbalances and changes that are happening at that time, we're addressing that specifically. So really we want to take kind of that intersection of where someone's gender identity and have certainly a respect and a place for that, as well as biologically what their body is going through and the type of support that we can provide within the VA system.
Okay. So tell us also, too, how unique is women's reproductive health and in your program? How unique is your program to treating women's reproductive health in the VA system? Do all VAs have this? And how does it compare to what you might see in the civilian world?
Yeah, so not all these have this, although I am fortunate to be part of a wonderful network of women's mental health champions that are across the VA. So there's a women's mental health champion at every single VA system. The national program has worked really hard over the last couple of years to set up champions there who really are there to pilot new programs and services, and reproductive women's mental health specifically has been on their radar for a little while. We actually have a medical director, a women's reproductive medical director within our national program, who was previously a psychiatrist here with us at Hines, who I know very well, Dr. Laura Miller. So we know that she is kind of leading that field and making this a big part of the VA services. So I believe it's something that's in development for many different places. However, how you provide those level of services might look very different. There's a saying out there that if you've been to one VA, you've been to one VA, because what they offer and how they offer it certainly differs. But I can tell you a little bit about kind of what that looks like within our clinic. So we refer to our clinic as providing specialty services for a very important reason. One, we want to make sure that we're recognizing kind of this unique gender-specific experience that women veterans may present to that might highlight the need for specialized treatment compared to those that identify as male patients. And it's particularly important if we really take a look at the population of women veterans for a second. So I like statistics. I'm going to throw a little bit of statistics out here. So women account for roughly about 10% of the veteran population. And the total population of women veterans across the next decade is estimated to increase by average about 18,000 women per year. And the number of women veterans that actually seek VA healthcare services has tripled in the last 20 years. So there's approximately about 500,000 women who are enrolled in VA healthcare systems, and they make up about 30% of all new patients that are enrolling in the VA. And of those, if we look at kind of the population within women veterans, about 2/3 of them are under the age of 55. And we know that general reproductive ages between the ages of about 18 and 44, that represents about 42% of women. So this is really the fastest growing group of VA healthcare services and consumers. And so even though we know that these reproductive milestones are natural biological processes, they can unfortunately really cause difficulty in impacting kind of that physical health and the mental health risks that we talk about. So our team specifically is really comprised of specialty trained psychiatrists, psychologists, peer support specialists. We work with our maternity care coordinator very closely, social workers, and then also trainees who are trained to focus on this intersection between reproductive health and mental health conditions, including depression and anxiety and PTSD. So our goal really is to provide a gender-sensitive assessment and interventions that really help our women veterans achieve their recovery goals and improve their wellness by managing the impact of these reproductive health events, which I haven't told you yet about, but I will in a minute when we get there to talk about kind of the conditions that we treat.
So for people who have female reproductive sex organs, do you see a difference between in or challenges between younger people versus older people? How does that change over their life cycle?
Yeah, so I would say, there's a common misconception that when we think about reproductive health, people only think about that perinatal period, as I was talking about earlier. However, it really is kind of the range across the life cycle. So let me kind of give you some of the common areas that we might focus on, and you'll see kind of how widespread across this life cycle that it can be. So a lot of times we'll work with patients that come in anywhere from premenstrual mood changes. So this is where there's an onset of physical, emotional, or behavioral symptoms that typically occur in the last week of the luteal phase, which is about 1 to 2 weeks before menstruation. And so that's for anyone who is currently having a period. And we know there's often a premenstrual mood exacerbation. And specifically, we might treat a disorder that's called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD. We might work with individuals who are coming in that are trying to have some family planning decisions. And so there might be some distress related to preconception and decisional strains between themselves and their partner. They might also have consultation questions for a psychiatrist with medications or different treatment options. We also work with individuals who are making contraceptive choices. So what birth control method do I choose to go on, and what's the interaction with the psychiatric medications that they might be taking? We work with women who have experienced infertility distress and the mood changes that are subsequent to that, whether that includes reactions to the procedures, the treatments, the invisible loss that they might actually be experiencing because of the hopes and the desires for parenthood that might be taken away due to those infertility struggles. We work with women during the perinatal period, so that's during pregnancy and up to 1 year postpartum. Our psychiatrists work on medication and treatment options, what is safe in order to take during pregnancy and while breastfeeding. We work with women who've experienced reproductive trauma. So this can be things like pregnancy loss, which includes miscarriage, pregnancy terminations, complications during labor and delivery that can be identified as traumatic. We also work with women who experience perimenopause. So there's a lot of mood disruption around that time, which includes some of the vasomotor symptoms, which are hot flashes, and night sweats, which are understandably really uncomfortable for women, and then also the experience of mood changes, so increased irritability, depression, and sadness. So as you can see, we work with a lot of different areas across kind of that full life cycle. So the experience might be different in what someone's going through depending on that life stage. However, we approach care in a very similar way and really trying to understand their reproductive health, what's going on with that event, how that's interfacing with their mental health, whether it's increasing anxiety or depression, sleep-related concerns, disordered eating that can happen during these times, or substance use to cope with the stressors that are going on, and giving them some good options for treatment and care that we can provide in order to help them work on the recovery related to that.
Mm-hmm. So how do people get in touch with the Women's Clinic? How do you reach out and get into the community and make people more aware? And particularly, and I'm glad you talked about the life cycle, because a lot of veterans, or our veteran population in general, is aging. So the majority of our veterans are seniors. And so you have a lot of senior women who are maybe going through menopause or maybe have gone through menopause. I'm curious about how that their military experience, particularly if they've been deployed, how that affects that psychological aspect and mental aspect of their reproductive health, and how they're going through these different life changes in their bodies and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we noticed within our veteran population that many of the patients that we see within our clinic are not just going through this reproductive life event and are subsequently having an experience of an increase in mental health concerns like anxiety and depression. Most often, these are comorbid with pre-existing concerns. And actually, those pre-existing concerns put them at a higher risk for experiencing some of the mental health impacts.
Not to interrupt you, but when you say comorbid, explain that a little bit for people that aren't in the medical field.
Yeah, thank you for catching me on that one. That's an important one. Sometimes I catch myself with that jargon. It's good to make sure we're clear on that. So when we think about comorbid, that means that someone is diagnosed with more than one mental health disorder at the same time. So for example, someone who might experience major depressive disorder, which is periods of ups and downs with their moods that last at least for a 2-week period and can sometimes last up to months. Or even a year or so for individuals. And so they might be experiencing those moments of depression. And on top of that, someone might also have a diagnosis of PTSD, where they're having recurring memories or dreams or images of a trauma that they might have experienced, whether in childhood or in the military or after the military. And that creates a lot of arousal, right? So being more alert, more on guard, more irritable, and so forth. And so when we say that, what I mean is that a lot of the women that we might be coming in might have anxiety or depression related to that reproductive health event that they're going through. So let's say during pregnancy. However, they might also have the existence of a predated medical condition or a psychiatric condition. So someone might have PTSD prior to that. They get pregnant. It's a very stressful time, understandably so, and so they're actually at higher risk for development of those conditions at that time because of that vulnerability. There's actually in a woman's life, for her physical health and her mental health, there is no more vulnerable period during that perinatal period. So during pregnancy and after, due to the risk both of on our physical health and then also on our mental health and our well-being.
So in the women's
It's
clinic
really
is
important to get connected, during these times.
Yeah, so does a women's clinic, to be clear, do they? So
Mm-hmm.
you guys have both gynecologists and psychologists working together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we think about the range of services that we offer, our clinic specifically is an outpatient mental health clinic. So what that means is that we are kind of housed within our main mental health building at the Hines VA. And I can tell a little bit about the types of services that we have specifically related to psychiatry and therapy. What you're asking about is what we have within our women's health clinic, which is a primary care clinic. And in that primary care clinic, we have general PCPs, of course. We have gynecology that's available for our women veterans, and we have what we call co-located mental health clinicians. So we call them primary care behavioral health. So they're social workers and psychologists that are located right within that women's clinic that can do warm handoffs. If a veteran's coming in distressed related to perhaps maybe the exam or the appointment that they have, they might be able to get in touch with that social worker or that psychologist. And then often they might do some short-term treatment and then refer more to kind of the longer-term or the outpatient treatment programs that are available within our mental health service line.
So once again, how do people get in front of you? So people, are they referred mostly from the women's clinic over to you guys to kind of get, and what are some of the things that might trigger a referral to you guys?
Yep, that's a great question. So, yes, part of our team is actually comprised of the providers that are in that primary care clinic, so our mental health providers. So they might often make those referrals. They see someone for a few sessions, recognize, typically they might keep someone if it's like a mild to moderate case, but someone that might be presenting with more moderate to severe symptoms is a better fit for more of our outpatient programs, which can be a little bit longer in the length of care that we can provide for them. And so our clinicians that are in our primary care unit might refer then to us. We get a lot of referrals actually just from our mental health intake center. So women veterans who might be just accessing the VA system for the very first time. We have a number of veterans who might recognize, hey, I'm really stressed out, having a difficult time with this pregnancy, and so I need to ask for help. And they might come in just through kind of that frontline treatment approach through the intake center, and then they get referred to us as kind of that specialty clinic where we can work with them. We also have our psychiatry work with our general mental health clinic as well. And so if someone experiences a reproductive health event during that time, they might already be seeing them for medication, so they might only refer to therapy. So we've got a range of different services. So our psychiatrists specifically, they can assist with one-time consultations or multiple visits to really meet the best needs of our women veterans. So they might have a one-time consultation, for example, if the person is currently working with a psychiatrist that's not a reproductive psychiatrist. Maybe they are considering pregnant or kind of considering their options to become pregnant or currently are pregnant. They have some questions, some concerns about the medications that they're currently on, whether they go off that medication, which is unfortunately very common, which actually increases the risk of major depressive episodes during that time. So we know that many of the medications, especially SSRIs, which are a pretty standard depressive medication, are relatively safe. And so we want to make sure that someone who's knowledgeable about those medication options is having these discussions with our patients so they can come in for kind of that one-time consultation. And our psychologists also treat people kind of more long-term, whether it's med management during pregnancy up to postpartum and breastfeeding. Therapy, on the other hand, we can offer individual therapy services, and we really base it on an evidence-based, recovery-focused, and time-limited options to improve kind of mental health and reproductive health distress. And we typically take an approach of either cognitive behavioral therapy, which works on identifying the ways that emotions and thoughts and behaviors are all connected to the distress that someone might be experiencing, whether it's anxiety or whether it's depression. And so we make those connections and help them make changes. The other treatment that's most often used is called interpersonal psychotherapy, which is really about this bidirectional link between our mood and our relationships. So when we are not feeling good, whether it's because of anxiety or depression, it's very likely to have a negative impact on our relationships. And when we're not satisfied with our relationships, it's also likely to have a negative impact on our mood. And so we know a lot of these reproductive health events are often related to our partners or family members or the support that we have or that we don't have. So this can often be a really nice therapy to help boost social support and help improve relationships. to better manage the stress that someone might be experienced. We also do some trauma
Doctor,
work.
I got to cut you off because you ran out of time. We got about 10 seconds
okay.
left. Got to have you back to kind of go more into, because a lot of questions I want to ask you about, particularly when it pertains to, because LGBTQ Pride Month, when people go through transition, so they still have female reproductive organs, how does that complicate, or what are some of the challenges that are unique to that group of people? So thank you for your time. Dr. Kate Colangelo is a licensed clinical psychologist here in Illinois at the Edward Hines VA. This is America's Heroes Group.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank's Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group. And of course, we have our partner with us today again, the partner with the Veterans Legislative Voice and our AHG Correspondent. Today is Saturday, June 17, 2023, June 18, tomorrow, Sunday, is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all those fathers out there, particularly those that served overseas and been away from your families. June is LGBTQ Pride Month and PTSD Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega. And Shakai is our studio engineer today. Stephanie Kalota is with us. She is the Army Sergeant First Class veteran, founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice, and she is our AHG correspondent. And we have a video and also an audio. So those of us on the radio listen to us on AM 1690 and WVON, and those seeing us on YouTube, we have a video and audio clip we're going to play for you from News Nation. Elizabeth Vargas. No continuity in mental health care from the VA.
Many veterans who served their country, especially those in combat, the return to civilian life can be difficult. The number of vets struggling with depression, anxiety, and PTSD has risen dramatically in the last few decades, and getting help is often a struggle of its own. One veteran took his frustrations with the mental health care he was getting from the VA to social media. In a TikTok post, raw with emotion, his message clearly struck a chord and has since gone viral. Joining us now live with more is News Nation correspondent Brooke Schaefer. Hey, Brooke.
Hey, Elizabeth. Joseph Contisano is an Army veteran. He served in Afghanistan, and since being home, he sought treatment for his mental health, a process he described as a maze filled with red tape.
In a video now seen by hundreds of thousands, we see retired Army Sergeant Joseph Contisano break down.
The VA has continued to let me down.
Frustrated over the mental health care he says he's received from the VA.
I just want some continuity of care, dude. I'm so tired of it. I've been off all my medications. 2 years I've been doing it on my own, man. I'm just fucking white knuckled. I'm gripping. Jesus. I'm so tired of it.
The Army vet who lives in Florida didn't want to share his diagnosis, but said the VA let him down, constantly switching his doctors, a process he says can take weeks or months.
Years ago, maybe when I didn't have the support system I do, or if the situation had been changed, or my internal strength or the internal strength of another individual sitting in that seat, that might have been the last video they ever recorded.
A recent study found 24 U.S. veterans die by suicide every day, most diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Jason Kander with the Veterans Community Project wrote The Invisible Storm, a book about his painful moments with PTSD.
I, like a lot of veterans, waited way too long to get care and to reach out. I spent about 10 years, a little over 10 years, kind of telling myself that what I was dealing with couldn't be PTSD because I didn't feel like I had earned it. That's what most veterans think, because when you're in the military, one of the things that you're taught is, somebody has it worse.
From 2001 to 2015, as many as 500,000 troops have been diagnosed with PTSD.
These doctors keep quitting, they keep switching.
When we asked about the claims in this video, the VA said they couldn't discuss it due to patient privacy.
We memorialize all of those who have fallen in service to our country, in combat, but imagine if we built a wall for all of the individuals who committed suicide as a direct result of the shortcomings of the mental health care in this country, who served their country honorably. Imagine how big that wall would be. It'd be gigantic. And to think that it's preventable is a complete, it's an understatement. It's absolutely preventable.
And that Army vet told us he has since heard from the VA after posting that video. They apparently called him, offered to help him with his case, and of course look into why this happened in the first place. Elizabeth?
That video, Brooke, is really difficult to watch, and yet I'm so glad people are and know more about what these men and women who served our country so bravely are going through. Brooke Schaefer, thanks. That was a powerful report. Really appreciate it.
Today.
That video is really, I'm doing all right. That video is really hard to watch for a lot of people, I know.
Mm-hmm. So there are some legislative bills and policies addressing the VA mental health care system. We had some people on our show before, people from National Nurses United, for example, they've talked about shortage of medical staff, and then also the turnover that's common because a lot of the people that work in the VA medical health system don't get paid or compensated as much as people in the civilian world. And then also sometimes it's a training ground for a lot of people in the medical profession. They're looking to get trained or get training in the through the VA, and then they move on to the civilian jobs with bigger pay and better benefits and things like that. So tell us, what do you know about these bills, and what is going to be done about this problem?
Well, first I do want to point out there's a few legislations that's been put out there that's actually helping or should be helping soon. And because, it takes a couple of months to get them going after they've been approved. One bill I do want to point out is the Patient Advocate Tracker Act, and that was passed in the last congressional session. Almost 2 years ago, a little under 2 years ago. And the great thing about this act was that it directed the VA to digitize the complaint system for patient advocacy issues. So if, like this veteran, he's going through a lot of issues with the lack of continuity and everything like that, anyone in his position, or even just anywhere close to his position, not even that extreme, can contact a patient advocate. And that's, they have a plethora of them at every VA hospital, so I really encourage people to go. The digitized portion is not fully up yet. I can tell you that there has been an initiation of a lot of digitized things that has to do with the patient advocacy. Pretty much if a veteran goes to get a radiology appointment, or they go to the pharmacy to get some help, more often than not, they're going to get an email prompting them, hey, you did this, let's fill out a survey. We'd like to see how your experience was. And you can actually make a little bit of a difference on this. Personally, myself, I went through a interesting road on radiology, and with breast cancer, I've talked about it here before, of how women veterans with certain eligibilities can now get breast cancer exams. And I had a lot of difficulty just trying to get through that process. So by the time that I finished with the radiology exam, I wrote all that down in the survey, which was really difficult because they limit you, I think, at like 200 words. But I wrote it all out, sent it. Not 2 days later, the chief of radiology gives me a call to ask about my experiences, to find out, how can we make this better? Explains to me why things are happening and when things are going to be improving. So I really want to encourage people to use that source of the patient advocacy office. And you can actually look them up online, Google your VA hospital patient advocacy. And I looked it up for my own VA, and you can see pictures, names, phone numbers, and you can even log into My Healthy Vet and send them a secure message. The secure message is really cool, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know. Secure messages actually show up in your C file whenever you do claims and compensation and things. It actually shows up there. So if you're having any issues with your appointments with your doctors, those secure messages are saved to a record, so that can actually be brought back later if you have even further issues. So FYI, you got documentation there when you send those messages.
So what's being done about the turnover? Because what the veteran in the video talked about was the fact that he was constantly seeing different physicians or different social workers or psychologists or whoever he was seeing, and there was no continuity in his treatment. And then reading about this, people complain oftentimes, even in blogs, people talk about how they have to tell their story all over again. They start out telling a story to one person and then have to go through the process again when that person changes, and it's a constant revolving door. Is the VA health system effective at when we have this type of inconsistency in the treatment and the physicians and so on?
There is a huge amount of attrition rollover, and that's mostly because there was such a issue of the hiring. There's been a ton of hiring shortages. So what happens in any agency, government, or company when you have the hiring shortages, you often hire from within, and then you go through the process to then hire more from the outside, especially for the lower positions, and that can actually cause a lot of issues for veterans because they're seeing the high rollover of the doctors. It is really difficult. I've actually gone through 4 primary care doctors in 2 years. In 18 months, I am about to go through to my 3rd psychologist. And so I completely understand and sympathize, and you guys are not alone. And so there's a few options out there, the few bills and acts that's out there that still need to be passed that I'll point out. So if you guys want to contact your congressional elected officials, There is the PFC Joseph Dewar Peer Support Program Act. Now, this act doesn't specifically go into trying to keep and try to slow down or stop the rollover, but what it does do is that it has the peer support, peer-to-peer mental health programs. Those can be the continuity for the veterans as they go through a lot of the rollover that's going to be happening here. And it's a necessary evil because of the hiring shortages and all the things. The VA has also been, they have also released that they have streamlined their hiring, and they're actually hiring them much quicker than they have in the past. It's actually supposed to be one of the fastest in the past decade. So just FYI out there, there is some help coming. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of these issues. So keep on working on it, and also contact your patient advocacy if you have an issue.
So do you know if there's any bills? I know there's been talk in Capitol Hill about, and people actually within even different groups, and they're trying to help people that work in the VA system and the healthcare system be able to collect a bargain for better wages and things like that, better compensation. Is there any movement on that, do you know of?
Not that I know of right now. The closest we got was last congressional session, and that was for pediatric care. And it was mostly of the relabeling and all of the mess, because there's a lot of red tape and issues happening behind the scenes when it comes to hiring and the slots and the positions. And so there was a bill that came out that was passed last year for that, but we're hoping that a few things will be passed. The next bill I can suggest is a little bit of a touchy subject, because it comes with a complicated issue. Everybody understands community care right now. For those that don't know, you're able to go see people outside of the VA if you meet certain criteria, which is often if the VA doesn't currently have a doctor or a specialist for the type of service that you're looking for, or they can't schedule you within a certain time frame for that. My own psychologist has suggested that I go to community care because of the rollover that's happening. If I find a small clinic with, one or two doctors, that the ones that own their own clinics, I'll likely be able to have that continuity of care for a good amount of time, mostly until they retire. Mm-hmm. So those type of things is often suggested. The bill that I'm going to suggest, it's called the Veterans Health Empowerment, Access, Leadership, and Transparency for Our Heroes Act. The short, Health Act of 2023. It was introduced by Senator Moran from Kansas, a Republican. I'm happy that I'm promoting the Republicans that submitted this, and this act would actually help streamline some other issues that's been happening within the community care program. So it's mostly to help with the red tape that's going on there.
Mm-hmm. And that's what was going to be my next question, which is how hard is it for someone to get referral to a civilian doctor or outside the system? I know there's different processes for people if they can't get the care in their VA, or even if they just want to go to another to an outside civilian source. Going to, like someone that has their own practice might be the way to go, particularly if you want that continuity, because if they have their own practice, they're in it for, you're going to see that person for their career. So that person is going to be there until they retire or they go out of business, one or the other. So how easy is it for someone to get that referral to go to see or be able to go outside of the VA walls and go see a civilian doctor?
It depends on where you live, honestly, because since they're going to be going out to community care, it depends on who's eligible for the program. All clinics and all doctors are not automatically eligible. They actually have to enroll. They do their own process to try to get put on the list, on the preferred list. So then they can set up those things, and it can also take a little bit of time. I was able to get sent out in community care for massage therapy, believe it or not, and that took about 7 weeks for me to get the call to get the process started. And frustratingly, they regulate how many appointments you're supposed to get within a time frame. And of course, since I had to wait for that long, and I had to wait, I guess, 9 weeks total to get my first appointment, I was already halfway through the time frame. But the good clinics that know how to work the system, basically what they can do is actually request the extension because of the time frame, because of the delay, and that can get approved, and it's approved pretty easily. The clinic I go to for that is phenomenal, and they know how to get things started and take care of you, basically. So yeah, there's still red tape and a lot of bureaucracy that goes into it.
So now, can I ask you a personal question and kind of get more color on this topic?
Go ahead.
So when you were going through your experience and you were looking for a psychologist, and you were in the VA system, and the turnover was constant, you didn't have the continuity you're looking for, how did that affect you personally? What was your experience, and can you explain to someone who's not familiar with that type of problem, like how you felt and what kind of complications it posed to you?
It's complicated. The first doctor I had, we were okay. I mean, he wasn't that great, but you know what? I got done what I needed done. So when he left to go to another department within there, because they stood up a whole PTSD clinic, which is where a lot of psychologists, at least in my area, in that VA hospital is going. I was okay with it. I actually got a new doctor that had just started, got the appointment, and it was really quick. This new one, the second one, is phenomenal. I've had a lot of progress, and as soon as he told me, I started crying because I didn't want to lose or go back in everything that I've already progressed. I was worried that I was going to regress and go back and actually lose all the ground that I've already taken. So it was really hard. And my doctor. Wow. Go back to my doctor. So I actually thank God my psychiatrist had extra time and he could take me on. We did a little bit sooner, because usually I see him every 6 months, because the medication that I'm on is pretty good and we're in a good groove right there. But I just needed somebody to talk to and go through it. So I saw him at least every 3 to 4 weeks, during that time frame, which helped. But not everybody has that. And so not everybody's going to go through the same experience that I do.
They say there's about 500,000 veterans today that have PTSD, at least that they acknowledge that they have 500,000. I know that a lot of people debate about that, and a lot of veterans don't believe that. They believe that, that it's rare and not too many people have PTSD. And then some people kind of water it down into an extent, because we got to talk about, we have 18 plus million veterans across the country. So 500,000 really is a drop in a bucket. My personal opinion on this, just from this experience being a veteran myself, never been deployed, never been overseas, I think all of us have some kind of degree of PTSD at some level, this going through the military training, going through the military cycles, and particularly if you've been deployed or have combat experience. I think we all have it. It just manifests in different ways. We just don't have it to the grave extent of maybe the person we saw in the video, who's going through severe trauma currently still. But we've all been affected by it at some level, whether it be minute or grand or anywhere in between. Even people outside of the military experience, people growing up in violent neighborhoods, there's a lot of research and studies on that to talk about that. So are we doing a better job at acknowledging, as a VA taken, we believe that because we have these shows all the time talking about PTSD, is the VA really taking this serious enough to really address the issue? And are they using the best efforts to utilize all of the resources around them? Because like we talked about, it would have been nice, for example, if you were going through your treatment and you were able to get the doctor's information. So whatever, because I'm sure he's practicing today, the one that you really, really appreciated. Why couldn't you go see him in his private practice or wherever he went to after that and get a referral to go see that guy? And why would it take 7 or 8 weeks or months to go get a referral?
Well, actually, I'm not eligible for the PTSD program. I can't remember what made me ineligible So I couldn't follow him over to that. There's also another thing that's that a lot of people don't think of, at least for my VA and some of the other, I guess, regional ones. They have this new thing of they want to plan out like short-term goals to work on. And they have this very strict curriculum and set of things to do that they're trying to enforce on their psychologists to try to do on all of their patients. The problem is that doesn't fit everybody's needs. That definitely doesn't fit my needs because I have a lot of complicated things going on. So I don't work really well in that type of forum. So that's the other thing that my psychologist basically encourages. That if I go to community care, I can go and get help without having to stick to the VA's curriculum, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another crazy, frustrating thing that's going on here, especially with this bill that I mentioned, the Health Act, is that there is a argument that's made by veterans advocates that community care and the Mission Act was the start of the privatization, cannot say it right, of the VA. Mm-hmm. And so the community care is basically the start of that to basically try to dismantle the VA. And in some respects, it does ring true in some arguments. The other frustrating thing about community care and everything that came out in the Mission Act is that since the VA is paying for the community care stuff, they might have less funding and less time to work on their own issues to hire the people they need to fill the gaps that they have. And so then they're kind of in this weird, vicious cycle of having to take care of the veterans that they don't actually have the services for, and they spend time on that, but then they don't have time and funds to spend time on filling the gaps that they have.
But to me, like that argument, we've had experts on our show, particularly in the early years. We've had there was I forget this lady's name. God forgive me, but there was a researcher who's written many books about this, and really touts the VA system as being ahead of its time and also extremely comprehensive and powerful as a tool to treat veterans, and even hails it, if not on par, in some cases ahead of the civilian healthcare system. And she was on our show years ago, and I remember we had a conversation with her, and she was very much against privatization. However, I do see that there is a place for having the ability, particularly in rural areas, to be able to go to a clinic that doesn't have the service the services for that clinic are not available in your local VA, or your VA is too far away. And then on top of that, I mean, like in your case, unless the VA is going to pay more money, which National Nurses United has been on our show and talked about this over and over and over again. They don't even have the power to collective bargain for better wages. And they're overworked, understaffed, and they're underpaid. So how do you get from point A to point B? There's a lot of things we got to do. First of all, we got to look at the defense budget. We have an $800 billion defense budget, a $200 billion budget. We're actually trying to push for $300 billion this year for healthcare. And for not just healthcare, but for everything related to benefits, including healthcare. So that includes home loans, that includes education, that includes everything. All the stuff that treats the actual individual, we put a drop in a bucket compared to what we actually spend on blowing things up.
Yep.
So we're running out of time. Any final words on this? Or anything we could recommend for us to do as veterans and as civilians and listening to this show today?
Contact your congresspeople, let them know what you're concerned about, have them figure out, and so they can actually become a co-sponsor. They can make arguments, make amendments, call them and make suggestions. They'll take suggestions. They love to hear from constituents.
This is America's Heroes Group. You heard Stephanie Kalota again, great correspondent, great person, and also the co-founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank's Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
We have in our Chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, free service, free food. Look good. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service. Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world?
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
And welcome back to America's Hero Group. This time with our Roundtable. We call this Roundtable Community Outreach. Today is Saturday, June 17th, 2023. Sunday, tomorrow is June 18th, and that is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all those fathers out there, particularly in the military community, particularly those guys who've been deployed, been away from your kids and your wife and your significant other. June is LGBTQ Pride Month and PTSD Awareness Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega, Scott on our production. And of course, Chicago's in the studio doing our engineering. And we have our studio panelists with us, none other than our executive producer and our director of America's Heroes Group, Glenda Smith. We're going to talk about honoring Father's Day because Glenda wanted to bring this topic up because she had a couple of stories to tell us about why she came up with this idea and also how important fathers are in America. How are you doing today?
I am so blessed, co-host Sean Claiborne, Illinois National Guard veteran, and you are the most of the co-hosts. So thank you, sweetheart. No, it's always important to tell people thank you and to show them and honor with appreciation for their work, for their sacrifice. Because when a person gives you all, it's only right that you say thank you, appreciate you, respect you. So yes. So last year, Sean, I was in meat market on the north side area, getting some food ready because I was going to visit my mom and cooking and all that. So I was in there on Father's Day. I was asking a question about the ribs, and so the gentleman turned to me. He was like, ma'am or miss, you live in Chicago and you don't know how to grill ribs? And I'm like, excuse me, I know how to cook on the stove. I don't know how to grill. I'm learning. And then I said, and by the way, happy Father's Day. And he said, thank you. And then he said to the other gentleman, man, happy Father's Day. He said, now, have you noticed nobody in here has said happy Father's Day to us? He said, and the way he said it broke my heart because I saw the look on his face. So last year I mentioned that. So this year it has a different meaning because you are aware, and some our staff and people, that I lost my dad in April. So okay, but anyway,
how did that make you feel? Kind of tell us a little bit about that. So when you had that experience of losing your father, and we all of us at some point think about or know that we're going to lose our parents at some point in the future, God willing, and everything happens and it's due time. That your parents pass after you. God forbid you have to bury one of your children. But when you went through that process, how did you feel and how did that change your life?
Well, tomorrow's not here yet, so today I'm okay. Tomorrow I'm going to accept whatever I'm feeling. I'm not going to try to block it and hide it and pretend like it's not happening. He died in April from a massive heart attack, and so my sister and brother and I had to decide to let him go because his organs were shutting down. So to answer your question, it was rough because I'm a daddy's girl. And I want to acknowledge my mother, first of all, as a child, because I was born when they were still young. She was 19, he was 21, in the Jim Crow South. He left the South to make a better life for him in the North, but he didn't leave me. So I want to acknowledge that man for that, because he could have said, okay, I'm through with all this, and completely walked away, never called, never did anything, but he didn't do that. So my mother, she never, even though their relationship didn't work out, Sean, she never spoke ill of him, not one time, when I was a child. She never said he did this, he didn't do this, he didn't send this. She never disrespected that man. So based on that, I didn't know not to love him. I didn't know not to appreciate him. I didn't know not to respect him. She and my family taught me to love and respect him. So we're going to get to that part, because I feel like younger children who have the absence of that father figure in their life, I'm not blaming the mother, but I'm blaming the mother. What are you saying in front of these kids? What are you doing in front of these kids? Are you using them as a pawn to pay him back, to get back? Because it's too much of a disconnect in our community in terms of making sure that we are absolutely honoring and respecting our fathers, uncles, and brothers and everybody else as fathers. So based on that, It was rough because I have a college degree because of that man. I got a I became financial stable because he supported.
But based on that, one thing you touched on, the fact
Sure.
that a lot of people grew up without fathers. I'm an example of that. My father was not there when I grew up. However, the thing that I think is important in the military culture, the military has a very strong opinion about your role as a parent, period, particularly when it comes to men being fathers. A lot of men went overseas to Vietnam. You know, Cliff can attest to this. Ernesto can attest to this. Rochelle can attest to this. They're all Vietnam vets. They left children in Vietnam. Went over there, hooked up with women over there, and then had babies over there, and left those babies over there. The military still says, no, those are your children. You're gonna, if necessary, we're gonna garnish your wages to pay for what your responsibility. They are big on child support. They don't mess around with that. But I think that also leads to, at least in the military culture, the responsibility of a father to be a father, and also to make sure that you are there for your family, regardless, not let any wall keep you away from your own children.
Right.
And a lot of, unfortunately, and every culture is a little bit different, every community is a little bit different. I can speak for the African American community to some extent, because we do have, and also with people of color, you could say, but particularly in African American community, a lot of black men, and I hope the tide is turning, because I see the younger generation starting to be more fathers. I see a lot of young men who didn't grow up with fathers, who are making that effort to
become better,
to be present in their kids' lives and things like that, and also making better choices about. Going out and just have this, it's okay to party, but you really got to be more prudent. We always talk down about women when women are partying and doing the things that they want to do and having fun, and then a woman gets pregnant. It's the woman is the one is to looked down upon and frowned upon. That woman is called all kinds of horrible names.
Right.
But the guy that did it,
he walks away in the sunshine.
All right, he's considered a player. He's considered, a guy, a happening dude, whatever and stuff. Which is that is a problem because it destroys our communities. Because we have
and then you get that reputation of that deadbeat dad, that absent father, and depends on, based on the relationship not working out, what is she saying to that child? Does her bitterness, does her anger reflect back into that child? Because if it does, then boom, there's a cycle of that.
But this is the thing. My problem with that part of it, though, is that as a man, you need to step up and be a better figure, because nothing should keep you away from your children. If I had a child, nothing would keep me away from my child.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like in the case with your father, nothing kept him away from you and his family.
Right, but my mother didn't interfere by planting negative and distorted influences into my mindset.
I can agree, and that I can applaud, because there are women out there that will try to block.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless, as a man, you can't let anything stop you from being with your children.
Exactly. Just like Justin, one of the technical producers here at WVLN, he has 3 children. He works 2 jobs, and he's young. I see him taking calls. I see he left today because he was supposed to be on the show, but he had to leave because his younger daughter wasn't feeling well. He works 2 jobs, so there's no excuse. Age, there's no excuse in income for you not to be there some type of way, so that child knows its worth, self-worth. You're teaching that child respect, responsibility, because they see you as their role model. They shouldn't have to look at a damn video. They don't need Jay-Z, Beyonce, and no, they need to see you, because what goes on at house comes out into the community. The chaos in our community, it starts in the home. That's called home training. That's called that community. So what they're hearing and seeing, then there you go.
I really applaud cultures that really appreciate the concept of family and how important family is. There's in America, there's a lot of communities that family is everything. Family comes first before anything and everything. But unfortunately, I think we need to get back to that. And actually, I can say the same thing for whites and blacks. To be honest, to be real, we have to get up, do a better job at putting our family first and understanding that is where your community is developed. Your community
Absolutely.
starts with the families.
Absolutely.
And the families are broken down or they're not cohesive, then now you introduce, it makes it harder for you to get ahead financially. It makes it harder for you to get ahead and prosper and be able to and take advantage of education benefits and take advantage of all the things that are out there for you to get better jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of women out there that are holding it down. Unfortunately, they're holding it down by themselves.
Right.
Raising kids, and the fathers are not present. And even if you just be there, you don't necessarily even have to be like to provide the financial support necessarily, but just be there for your kids. Let your child know that you are there and that you love that child.
But then the saying, it takes a village, that applies directly, I think, to that black man. Let me explain to you why. My mother started a relationship with someone who I loved, and he became my father to me. Because the way that man loved me, I did not know he wasn't my father. I knew he wasn't my father, but he wasn't my father. His name was Jolie. And my mother was very particular about staying in that relationship with him because she saw how much he loved me as his child, but I wasn't his child. So it ain't so much biological, it's that love. It's that character of that black man or that man. Let's put it like that man. He stayed in my life forever until he closed his eyes last year. So it's that village because I have an uncle named Uncle Robert. I'm the daughter that he never had. He nourished and took care of me. I stayed with him and my auntie for 2 years. During high school, he didn't have to do that. So that's another village person. Do you understand? So, but that man had character. He's a Vietnam veteran. So he had the backbone of what they call a father that cared a little bit more beyond than he had to. That's that village. You have brothers that can become father-like figures. You have cousins that can become father-like figures, not to mention the grandfathers. As a little girl, see, I don't have any bad scars, and I'm blessed, Sean. I'm blessed by God because I gave him all the praise and glory for blessing good men and women to be in my life that has helped to guide and nourish me. My grandfather, great memories.
Let me answer this first. So when you you had your biological father and you had your father that was in your household, I'm assuming, right?
Right.
So
how
often did you see your biological father?
All the time. Even though he was in Detroit, I would go there and visit and get my school clothes. He was always an intricate part, be it in person or on the phone. And he was the kind of man, he was a man of honor and principles. I knew not to cross him. When I got defiant, he would put me back in my place instantly. Because he wasn't about wasting time, and he knew you can't keep making mistakes and think you're going to become a productive person. So he was straight up that no-nonsense constructive love. He got on my nerves. Sometimes I didn't like it, but he was that father figure of no nonsense that I needed, not what I wanted. Yeah. So
this is an unorthodox question in a sense,
sure,
and kind of controversial. But when you said your Jolie passed away last year, your father passed away this year, what hurt more?
That's a good question. To be honest, Jolie, ain't no sense in lying about it, because I felt at times that my biological dad didn't really lean in as hard as he could have. I didn't have to question that with Jolie. I didn't have to question that at all. I mean birthdays. I mean stuff that he remembered that sometimes my dad did forget. I'm like, what the hell is going on with this? But he's human. So I thank God once again that didn't linger in my spirit, that I became bitter or feeling like I wasn't truly loved, because I knew I was. He loved me the way he loved me. And as I got older, you start to realize, okay, I don't have kids and never wanted them. So you can't hold that father figure in a presence of perfection when you're not. Based on decisions, logical reasoning. So if you're doing stupid stuff and you just learn it, because that's a part of life. It's a work in progress. That person was only 21 years old. That person was only whatever. Don't expect them to come out don't expect a father to be perfect, because there's no rule books for when you become. And so out of fairness, let the bitterness go. Let the resentment go. Let the past go. Because you can, if you let God heal you from that, if you let God deliver and just release it, because all you have to do is look in the mirror and say, I'm not perfect, so how could I expect him to be?
Like in my case, my father wasn't there in my family, and that did lead to a lot of problems in our household. The fact that was my mother was one of those people that kind of held on and was kind of bitter about different things, and oftentimes you're only hearing her side of the story because he's not around. But still, once again though, no man should let anyone or anything come between them and their children. So that's just, no woman's gonna let that happen.
Absolutely. So,
but having said that though, the thing that I think is important is that a father just being there, making the effort to be present. You don't necessarily have to have resources or money or this or that.
Yes.
And oftentimes, I think a lot of men, I know men personally who are ashamed. They feel like that they have fallen short and they don't have the things they want to offer their children, so they just disappear. They haven't been present. So just be present.
Absolutely.
Just be there.
And I think the media, and I think the marketing, and I think the branding needs to change. Because I walked in Jewel's yesterday to go get some water and some other stuff. I didn't see not one balloon, not saying it has to be a balloon, but I saw nothing advertising Father's Day. On TV, how many commercials did you see edible arrangements and we're going to do all the, no, there's nothing really celebrating and honoring fathers like you do mothers. So it's a double standard.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's the thing. But then
it's
also
a double standard. We need to stop that, because that's not right.
I wonder though if as a man, because I don't really think about, like gifts or whatever. I'm not really a father. I do raise kids to help my girlfriend raise children, but I don't see myself necessarily as a father. To me, as a not having any kids of my own by blood. I believe that the child has to adopt you as their father. Okay, I mean you can't just declare yourself a father in somebody's life. You can take care of them, and fulfill that role to an extent, but they have to be the one to actually accept you as that person.
But there you go. See, you would be a Jolie. You don't have to be a biological father to be that father, because that's earned through relationship, of that character, of that connection, of that young lady looking at you, seeing the sincerity from your heart. That's what makes a father.
Right, I agree with that.
Yeah,
but we don't really harp. But as men, I don't think we really harp on that fact of where's our special day or whatever. We don't think about it that way. We just go about our business.
Because you know why? Because it's a way to, I think you're doing this I think you're doing it from a standpoint of, okay, but it's not okay. Because I give you a perfect example. Justin Young, who was supposed to be here today, he acknowledged, but it is a hurt to it when you see how the world is just like overwhelmingly Mother's Day, and then fathers be like, oh, happy Father's Day. No, that's BS on every level. So please let me acknowledge personally some strong father figures and fathers that have been a part of my life. Starting with my grandfather, who was my fishing and tobacco buddy. I used to chew tobacco as a little girl and go fishing with him. Oh, yeah, I did that.
You still got your teeth?
Shut up. My late father, of course, Charles Oliver Longstreet. My spiritual stepfather, Jolie Powell. My stepfather, Vincent Neal, who is another great man in my life. When I had surgery and could not move off a couch for like at least 3 to 5 days, he walked up and down stairs and brought me juice and water and never complained one time. And the way he loves my mother, I can't help but to love that man. He is a man of character also. I want to acknowledge, I've already done, my Uncle Robert, who's a Vietnam veteran, but Cliff Kelley. He's my godfather. He's a father figure. Cliff took to me in 2009 when people wouldn't talk to me because, who are you? I wasn't in the cliques. I wasn't important enough. Cliff has nourished me, has taken me under his wing. That's why this show is where it is today, because of Cliff Kelley. I want to acknowledge Congressman Danny Davis. I want to acknowledge Eddie Reed. I want to acknowledge Chuck Bowen. It's just so many wonderful, wonderful fathers. But I truly want to acknowledge Ivan Ortega, because his dedication, his honor to this show, him being a father. And I know I have called him when he said, Glenda, I'm right. I'm my kids. So we're gonna have to talk tomorrow. I'm like, boom, that's a dad. So thank you. Happy Father's Day. And I dedicate this show to all veterans, armed forces, family members, and the community. A moment of silence for our fathers who's now no longer with us.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Back to America's Heroes Group. And once again, with our community outreach, today is Saturday, June 17th, 2023. Sunday, June 18th is Father's Day. That's tomorrow, Sunday. Happy Father's Day to all those veterans out there, particularly those men who've been men who've been deployed. And also, we want to make sure that we know that June is LGBTQ Pride Month and PTSD Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our panelists with us today, Lisa Gavin, once again, the president of Next Level Credit and Funding. We're going to talk about credit repair and a new start after filing a complete bankruptcy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Pretty good. So we're talking about Chapter 7, Chapter 13. First, tell us the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, and then also, what is the process of getting that road started? When is someone ready to file bankruptcy?
Well, we'll take the first question first. Chapter 13 is basically a payment arrangement. It is to make sure that you're paying back your creditors, but it is a forced credit repayment of the debt, meaning that a trustee is stepping in and saying, hey, this person can only afford to pay back this amount based on what we see that they make. Whereas a Chapter 7 is a complete dissolution. It dissolves, gets rid of all of the debt. And that's a little bit tougher than it used to be because now there are income tests and other things to assure that you can't afford to instead pay back those obligations and can actually just, be allowed to wipe that debt out.
So when do people find themselves in a situation where it's a good idea to think about either situation, Chapter 7 or Chapter 13?
The bottom line is that when you know that you are in financial trouble, that you don't see a clear way to get out of it, that's when you really need to be considering bankruptcy. But it's more than just that. It's really looking at what are the other potential solutions. Are you still in position, for instance, to get a loan or a family member that can loan you some money that allows you to just manage for a while? Or is it truly a situation that you know that the outlook is bleak and you don't see where that income, where that money is going to come from to repay the debt? Then you really do have to think about bankruptcy. And in fact, these are exactly why the bankruptcy provisions were made. And bankruptcy laws are federal. So, once you decide to go that path, it's getting that help to say, hey, we recognize based on these income tests and other things that you can't manage this debt, and it allows you to have someone kind of step in.
So before we go into the meat of the conversation, tell us what are some of the negative consequences of debt? Because going to bankruptcy, because a lot of times some people are afraid of bankruptcy, and some people are like, I'll just file bankruptcy. So what are some of the negative consequences that can happen to someone who decides to go either Chapter 7 or Chapter 13?
Well, the crazy thing is there's negative consequences in both directions. There can be negative consequences for filing and then negative consequences for not filing. So let's start with consequences for filing. You're obviously going to get that ding on your record. So it'll be listed in public record that you filed a bankruptcy. There's going to be a period of time, typically 2 to 3 years, that you're not allowed to purchase other property or purchase property. There's going to be a period of time and an issue with certain lenders wanting to do business with you because they see that bankruptcy in your history. So there's no doubt about it, consequences, and it should not be taken lightly. That decision should not be taken lightly. But on the flip side, there's consequences sometimes for not filing. One of the things that I notice in working with clients, and I've been doing this for 20 years, is that some folks just get to the point that they give up and they know that they can't afford to pay the obligations. But what ends up happening is that they don't make a decision. They get analysis paralysis. And because of all of the negative connotations for filing bankruptcy, they don't file. Well, guess what that leads to? 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, repos. The list goes all the way down for how far your credit can deteriorate if you cannot manage that debt. And in fact, sometimes filing bankruptcy is the best thing to get that fresh start and to reboot the whole situation and to start fresh versus letting your credit go all the way downhill before, to be honest with you, still find that you can't manage those obligations.
And in the military, it takes it a step further. If you get behind on your bills, all a creditor has to do is just go find out if you're in the military, and they can, unless you're deployed, they can go basically and start snatching your paycheck. And it's very easy to garnish wages when you're not deployed in the military.
Yeah, and that's a whole, that's why I said the decision shouldn't be taken lightly, because there's lots of things that have to go into consideration when you're filing bankruptcy.
So tell us, so then what happens after the credit repair is done and after you've done a bankruptcy? So how do you repair the credit and how do you get that fresh start? Because oftentimes people find, 2 years after I've done bankruptcy, they're thinking their life is going to be miserable, that everything's going to be falling apart. Although I have to add too, though, for government jobs, in particular jobs in the military, oftentimes if you've had a bankruptcy, that might prohibit you from getting those higher positions and also getting those better government jobs, particularly if you're going to go into law enforcement, things like that. But also, when you they'll find out 2 years later, 3 years after a bankruptcy, they have 700 credit scores. So tell me about that. How does that happen when you file a bankruptcy and all of a sudden 2 or 3 years later you got this excellent credit, people throwing credit cards at you and throwing car loans at you?
I'm so glad you said that. And the reason that the people have to understand that it's not always a bad thing. A person that sometimes has to file, things happen, divorce, et cetera, right? And things get overwhelming and you can't manage the debt. And so what happens is for those who somehow or another have 700 credit scores in a short amount of time, they made the decision early to file. They didn't wait until they got 120 days past due, until debts charged off, until creditors were stalking them. They didn't wait to make that decision. Now, why is that important? Because the sooner you make the decision, the less your credit lapses. So you can literally go from being on time, maybe having a 30-day late, to have everything being stopped because you filed a bankruptcy. So then once that debt is wiped out after a few months, now you're sitting there and you don't have a lot of bad payment history that the people who waited have. So then when you start rebuilding credit, your credit rebuilds faster and your scores jump faster because your credit report is not littered with all of these late payments and this horrible history. And, to be honest with you, would you rather loan $50,000 to someone who doesn't owe anybody anything? Or would you rather loan $50,000 to a person that owes everybody, their mama and their daddy and their cousins and everyone else?
Yeah, true talk.
So, that's why you do have to really think about, does this make sense for me? And sometimes it is a better move.
So walk me through this process. So a person who is who has their credit starting to deteriorate, you mentioned 30, 60, 90 days late. One thing I want to make sure that people understand is some people panic when they're late on the due date of their bill, but it's not necessarily the due date of the bill that dings your credit. It's that 30 day after the due date that hits your credit. Walk me through that process. What are the things that are the dings on your credit that people fall into by accident or, just don't think about, or they get overwhelmed with too much expenses and things like that? How do those dings affect your credit?
Yeah. Well, 30-day lates are like the worst, because if you have on-time payment history, say it's the 15th, the bill is due on the 15th and now the 16th comes and you didn't pay. Oops. So they're going to charge you a late fee. But at that point, they're not reporting it to the credit bureaus. But if you wait 30 more days and you're saying, oops, 30 more times, that's a problem. And then that's when they then report it to the credit bureaus. And so a late payment can drop your scores. I've seen people drop as much as 100 points.
Wow.
From a late payment, if you prior, had good payment history, of course. If you have lates all the time, then it's not going to drop
so
you as
unfair,
far.
though, sometimes. I mean, like you say, you have a 700 score, you've never been late, and all of a sudden you miss one payment because maybe. I'm walking through a scenario. So say, for example, you have a medical bill. Mm-hmm. So, we go see the doctor. We talk about this a lot of time on our show because people go see the doctor. Sometimes they're going to see a civilian doctor. They get a bill in the mail, but they don't even realize they even got that bill. Maybe that bill got lost in the mail. Maybe they don't even trust if that's a real bill. They think their insurance picks it up or something like that.
Exactly.
It could be $25 or $100, whatever, something small. And then all of a sudden, they get a letter from a collection agency saying you didn't pay, this hospital this $75 or whatever it might be. So how is that going to be treated the same way as just a 30-day late, or how does that work?
Absolutely not. The most important thing to know is that obligations with your current creditors always carry more weight. So if I have a credit card, I have a car note, I have a mortgage, those things carry more weight in terms of maintaining those relationships. If something goes wrong, like a medical bill or something, and then you get a collection, collections are secondary companies. And so they can't report you as being 30 days late or 60 days late. They don't have a regular relationship with you. So it doesn't report the same way on your credit report, nor does it hurt you as much as current late payments. But it does reduce your score 15, 20 points, 30 points. I can see people reducing their scores because of those collections. And yes, a lot of times you don't know about them. But I'll say this real quickly. Every collection should come with a letter that comes in the mail that tells you you have 30 days. Every collection letter says this, to dispute the validity of this debt. And what happens is most people just toss the mail across the kitchen table, or they toss it, and they don't follow up with that creditor, or simply say to that creditor, hey, you need to provide proof of this. Because if you say nothing, you lose by default. But the good thing is that those don't hurt your scores as much. But collections do still reduce scores, yes.
So I know that pisses a lot of veterans off, because I know a lot of guys and a lot of women, they've been deployed or they've been on base, and then they're out training or doing their thing. They've been gone. They've been out of the house for 90 days. They've been out of the house for 6 months. And they might have went to the store and bought something or on credit, whatever, or they went and did something or whatever, and they got a bill in the mail, didn't pay the bill, and now all of a sudden they get a collections letter or something like that. And that collection letter was sitting in the mailbox for 6 months.
They missed that time frame, right?
Or the 90 days. So if there's any reprieve for them, what can they do, particularly if they've been deployed? Is something they could do to try to get that thing taken off, or at least to get that thing moved away?
I know we shy away from communications with companies. I don't know if it's just that we feel powerless or that we just feel like it's an annoyance, but you'd be surprised how communication makes a difference. You'd be surprised how asking to speak to a supervisor makes a difference. Yes, it may take multiple phone calls, but frankly, we give up too easily. We don't feel empowered to say, hey, I was deployed. Here's proof. I need this taken care of. I need this taken off. I need this settled. You know, you have to be empowered enough to have those communications. And chances are you have proof or documentation of what you're saying. If you're deployed, you have proof that you were deployed. If you were incarcerated, you have proof that you were incarcerated. So there's different things that you can do in your communications to get creditors to make decisions to, for instance, remove negative reporting. And, of course, they always tell you they can't, but they can.
Is it a good idea to settle with creditors? I know a lot of times creditors will take, if you say, okay, I owe you $5,000, but I'll pay you $3,500 if you just go away. Is that a good idea sometimes, or does that have negative consequences?
No, it's absolutely a great idea to negotiate with secondary companies, collection companies, because collection companies bought that debt for pennies on the dollar anyway. So why should I pay you every penny that you're asking for? So no, that's when the negotiation skills, you need to bring the claws out then and negotiate. And they're going to say, well, it's going to be reported as settled for less than the full balance. Whatever. You already have a collection reporting on my credit, and it's already hurting me. But they want to convince you that it's going to hurt you so much more. Not true. It's going to hurt. It's going to make you feel better to keep money in your pocket. So, you just negotiate a settlement amount with them, give them as least as possible. But the one thing that you want to try to do is tell them, upon payment of this money, I want this listing removed. The best time to negotiate is when you're holding the money in your hand. If you give it to them, then you have no negotiation power after that.
I ran into a guy who couldn't get into the military. Wish he could have, but he wanted to join the military. And one of the things he got into some severe depression about it, and then eventually he racked up a ton of debt because one of the things he wanted to get through the military was education benefits.
Right.
So he went and got student loans and upon student loan, and didn't end up finishing school, from what I understand. Now he's got a lot of debt. And I believe it's been sold to a collection agency, and so they're calling him trying to collect on this debt. Would that same strategy work for someone like him when it's an education loan?
Well, typically with education loans, they're very different because whoever's working collections for them typically are not external collection companies. They're more so a collection arm of the student loan company. And the reason that that's important is because there's different provisions that are built into student loans, like forbearance, when you have, hardships, financial hardships, or deferments. That means I'm back in school, so I'm not paying while I'm back in school. So there's different things that are built into student debt that gives you more leverage, and it is absolutely to your advantage to communicate with them to try to work something out. And they're the only accounts that go bad or go to collections and then become good accounts again. Student loans are very different because you can restore them.
Wow. So if you have a 90-day late, you can get that turned into a good relationship?
You can.
Wow.
Yeah, student loans are different in that because they know that those are going to be long-term relationships. Other debts, once they charge off, they're done with you. That's it. So it's, either pay them out and the relationship is closed, but they're not going to reopen and restore that relationship once it reaches that charge-off status. Where student loans will give you the opportunity to go into a payment plan. They're typically 9 months on-time payments, and then it goes back to a good account. So student loans, definitely do your best to work it out with them because they're almost impossible to get rid of in bankruptcy anyway.
So what type of services when you do credit repair, what type of services do you do and what types of things do you charge for?
The majority of my services are about helping people assess where they are. We don't do as much credit repair as we used to because the industry has gotten so muddy with just people who don't know what they're doing credit repair. And then these monstrosity of companies like Lexington Law and creditrepair.com that make some progress, but they don't teach you what things you need to do to develop your credit. So that's where my company comes in. We help people understand how to take it to the next level, how to deal with the different things like we're talking about, for instance. Okay, I got student loans, I got medical bills, I got these things. Yes, these things are likely to come off. These things are not. This is the way you need to maneuver to develop your score. These are the other things that you qualify for. These are new accounts, for instance, that you would qualify for to start rebuilding your credit history. Should I file bankruptcy? Given the situation that I see in my assessment, yes. So that's what we do. We really help to coach and mentor and help people personally assess where they are with their credit. So that's what our services typically entail. And then the other side of my business is once that's the case, how do I qualify to get more credit or to get funding for the types of things that I'm trying to do?
So that could be great for someone, say, maybe using real estate, who's maybe thinking about trying to buy, say, a commercial property or trying to buy, another building, but they're in a situation where because banks won't lend to them because they look kind of credit risky. I have a great friend of mine who is a real estate developer, and he had the hardest time. I mean, this guy's got at least 10, 15 years experience managing property, but he had to go to hard money lenders and he's got 700 plus credit score, money in the bank, but could not get a loan because of some of the rules and restrictions that banks have around commercial lending. Is that something that you help people with? How does that? What are some of the challenges in that?
Oh, well, I mean, real estate is probably the number one motivator in terms of why people come to us. So that's a regular thing that we deal with. We keep, I would like to say, very good relationships with bankers because it allows us to bring that type of assessment to individuals. Hey, you're here. You probably need to get X number more points, and then that should help you qualify for certain products. This is the way that you can get there. What needs to be done with my credit to get there and get those scores up. We refer people a lot of times to bankers. It's really more about understanding who wants you. So if you think about it from a relationship standpoint, every person you walk past in the street is not someone who wants or appreciates you.
That is true.
It's about finding who does. And we have to start thinking about the banking industry in the same way. If you don't fit the profile, for instance, for Citibank, don't go to Citibank. They're a little snobby. There's community banks to go to. There's I'm used to be a board member of Southside Community Federal Credit Union, for instance. Credit unions are great because they're more relationship based. So it's more about understanding where you fit in than it is that it's just an automatic no. You just don't know who's going to say yes.
So how do people connect with Next Level Credit?
Well, you can definitely visit us on our website, which is nextlevelcredit.com. If you have questions, because I always do this whenever I do any type of workshops, you can email me at Lisa, Lisa, at nextlevelcredit.com. So feel free, like I said, to visit our website, nextlevelcredit.com, or email me directly if you have a question. I'll be more than glad to answer.
And I'm going to check out your website and send you an email because we have to connect and do a workshop. We need to. I think it's a good idea, particularly nowadays because prices of things have gone through the roof. Inflation's been taking a hold in a lot of households. Interest rates have been going up a lot over the last year or so. And people are feeling the pinch of being able to try to pay their different bills, and they need strategies to try to increase their cash flow, because one of the things that are cash flow killers is when you used to have a $100 credit card payment, now it's $150 because the rate gone up.
Right, right. And it's learning how to play the credit game. Credit is a game, and you have to learn how to play it. And a lot of times we're playing Scrabble, but the game is Monopoly, and we have to learn how to play it. And the better you can play it, the better you can maneuver, and the better you can do financially. You can save money. You can, advance your financial life. Credit is such an important key to that.
So what is one of the most important things you would say to a person who's trying to build credit or maintain credit?
The biggest thing, and I think people often miss this point, they fall off the horse and then they don't get back on and keep riding. So the point being that if something goes wrong, you have to look at how can I keep building? How can I keep moving forward? And a lot of times when you have negatives on your credit report, people don't know how to start back rebuilding positive credit. So the first thing is just getting back to restoring positive payment history. The next thing is actually getting some more credit, even if it requires you to do it secured, meaning that you put the money up and then they issue you a credit card, for instance, a secured credit card, or going to your bank and getting a loan based off of your own money in the bank. There's all types of things that you can do to start rebuilding credit. And that's probably one of the most important things that people forget. They just kind of get disenchanted with the whole thing and then they stop building credit. Yeah. But it's like expecting to drive somewhere without gas in the tank. Your credit score is like gas in a tank. If you're trying to get somewhere, you have to fuel it.
And I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Lisa Gavin, president of Next Level Credit and Funding. Once again, what's your website?
It's nextlevelcredit.com.
Check out our website. And also, once again, we got to connect to do a workshop, because I think it's really important to get that information to the community and maybe even put it on YouTube. We'll see. We'll see what we can do.
I would love to. Education is so important.
Thanks a lot for your
time. And I just wanted to say
go ahead.
Happy Father's Day to the fathers. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
We're getting Glenda on the line right now. There you are.
That's what I am talking about. See how she acknowledged that with excitement?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't forget. She didn't just say, oh, it's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. No. People, let's celebrate fathers starting tomorrow, the same way we celebrate mothers. I was looking at social media.
Mm-hmm.
Ricky Smiley had some posts. They showed two sides. Mother's Day, it was a glass of wine, surf and turf. It was in front of an ocean view. And then, it's not funny, fathers, they had a TV dinner sitting on the table. I'm like, wait a minute, hold it.
That's about what it is. That's about right.
Funny, but not funny. So people, please, if you see a man tomorrow, let's just celebrate with a smile and tell that man, Happy Father's Day, because it does matter to them. Whether they want to acknowledge it or not, it does matter.
At least make a sandwich or something. Come on.
A sandwich, Sean, really?
At least. It's an upgrade.
No, let's just cook for them or take them out to dinner. Let's celebrate.
Steak would be good.
Woohoo!
Prime rib.
There you go. So today's show is dedicated to all our veterans, the armed forces that's serving right now who's not with their children. Mm-hmm. Y'all don't think that's a damn sacrifice of a Father's Day? Of course it is. They're not with their families. To the it's armed forces, veterans and
service members,
and all the, yes, absolutely, sincerely, happy Father's Day, because you earned it. We appreciate, we salute you men. Thank you so much for all that you are for this country.
It's America's Heroes Group. We'll see you next week.
Yes, we will.
Check us out on americashg.org. Also, make sure you see our YouTube and our Facebook page. We have some great shows from the past. You can get information about things we talked about today and other things we've talked about in the past. To get more data and information to help improve your life and be more powerful as a veteran community, we need to do that and make sure we do it in full force.
Oh, and guess what, people? Because of you, our YouTube channel is 102,000 subscribers. Yay!
There you go.
Bravo. to Ivan Ortega, to Lady Kaya. They keeps us excellent in balance with integrity. Boom.
See you next week.
Uh-huh.